this planet is unstable. They might be here because they already know that something is going to unfold here that will take us into another level of reality. Experience is so complex, but there's certain imagery in it that is consistent across many, many lives. And I think the leading is the owl imagery. The owl is a symbol of wisdom and mystery. Those are two things the visitors bring to us really in spades. Communion experience was to activate someone that they had already prepared to do what they intended me to do. And this is part of it. Warning against those things is fundamental to the close encounter experience. All of us, I think, hear those warnings in one way or another.
Welcome, everyone, to Cosmic Convergence, an experiencer-hosted podcast. Join us as we dive into the fascinating realms of extraterrestrial intelligence, consciousness, and more. We are a podcast by experiencers for experiencers. Today, I am joined with my fellow co-hosts, Daniel and Christian, and we are also joined by world-famous experiencer Whitley Strieber, author of the best-selling books Communion, Transformation, The Afterlife Revolution, and his latest book, Them. Whitley has had lifelong experiences with the visitors, and his experiences have led him to explore the nature of consciousness, our relationship with the visitors, and human existence even beyond death. Thank you again, Mr. Strieber, Whitley, for joining us today. It is a distinct honor and pleasure. My entire life, it's really culminated to this point, and so thank you so very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm always interested in other experiencers. I'd like to interview you guys, in fact.
That would be fascinating.
Down the road on Dreamland, because we do interviews with experiencers all the time, every month. There's at least one. Trying to get our heads around whatever this is.
Anytime you think that you've figured out a portion of it, it does a total 180 on you, and you just like, okay, so it's like more I think I know, the less I know. So, and that's just the nature of it.
You have to wonder if it's hiding or not. Why is it so secretive? Because the secrecy starts with them. It's not the government. They could end the secrecy. The visitors could end the secrecy today. They can land, they can walk out, they can do everything, but they don't. They hide instead. Why is that? Some of you guys must have some ideas. I certainly do. I think that anytime someone is taking something as sensitive as sexual material from human beings, you're going to have trouble if they know you're out there. I certainly would have had a very different sort of a life if I had known that was possible when it happened to me. And so, of course, they're secretive. The question is why they're doing it. And if they're taking eggs and sperm, which they are doing, or were, I don't know if they're doing it so often anymore. They're making babies. Where are they? And what lives have they had? How about mine? I've lost some of that material.
With lots of people, both in the intelligence community and public space, having described long-term plan that the visitors do have, what would you say that the hybrid program is about and the reason for them blending in with us? Do you have any thoughts or have come to any conclusions with that, with your own experience or those that you've talked with?
I know what I think what I hope some of the perhaps unwanted effects by them will be. One is that we're going to realize that telepathy is real. And once we realize that, we're probably going to be able to activate that in ourselves. I know it's there because when you're with the visitors, as some of you probably know, telepathy is easy. It's just part of being with them. But when you leave that particular situation, it's not there anymore. That's because it means it's in you somewhere. The ability is in you somewhere. People ask me always, or people sometimes come to me and say, well, I think I'm a hybrid. And I listen and I don't hear anything in here. In other words, they're not telepathic. So if they're not telepathic, then I wonder about that. The hybrids I have known that were real, whether the word hybrid is even correct, I don't know. It could be that they're not hybrids, but they're genetically modified somehow, have two characteristics that are unmistakable. The first is they're very autistic. The second is they are fluently telepathic. And there's three, and they cannot speak. In other words, they can't vocalize. Well, like the Greys are fluently telepathic, so testy that that could be a symptom of autism. I don't know. And they cannot speak either. They can make sounds, sort of like a bird, but not speak words like we can formulate words. So they're sort of similar in that respect. But what the hell are they for? This is the question I have, because the ones I have encountered are condemned to be on the peripheries of society because they can't speak. And if they can't speak, how are they going to function? And the answer is, I don't know. Or why are they there? Are they just an experiment that they tried to build a bridge species between us and found that it didn't work? Or maybe it did work. And the ones that I've seen are the rejects living in little enclaves here and there, perhaps. I'm not sure. Maybe there are people, who look like people out there who are fluently telepathic, who can speak and can live among us. In which case, we better watch out, because if they ever decide to do something like take power or something, they will succeed. So maybe that's why they're here.
What have you discovered, for the people that don't know, like the death experience or the soul, in relation to how there seems to be some kind of people who interact with these beings tend to get a greater level of awareness, such as yourself, about the universe, about what happens when we die? Is there anything about that you can talk about?
Fortunately, I'm not out here to keep secrets. That would drive me crazy. I think the soul is probably the most important part of this. Ironically, the soul is something that most Westerners don't feel is real, and we've lost touch with our souls. But if you ever have a real clean out of body break, you've got one, and I've had a number of those. A couple of them were actually staged by the visitors, so yeah, I do know that exists. And I would guess that it's a big part of this. Interesting thing happened years ago, back in the early 90s, when Anne was reading all the letters we got in, and we got thousands. They're now collected at Rice University, in fact, in an archive called Archives of the Impossible, along with John Mack's letters, which he got a lot of too. In any case, she came out of her office and she said, "Whitley, this has something to do with what we call death." And I thought, what is she meaning? And she said, a lot of these letters involve people's dead friends and relatives, as well as the aliens, if you can call them that. She didn't say that, but we were calling them visitors at the time. Well, I'll give you an example of what I mean. It's not in a letter, but it was someone who called me back before the internet. It was not easy to get a hold of someone like me. There was no email or anything, and I didn't want to be got a hold of either. So suddenly, my literary agent, called me from William Morris and says, "Whitley, there's a man who's trying to get a hold of you, and I think you should talk to him." And I thought to myself, well, someone who's found my literary agency, maybe it's pretty urgent. So I talked to him, and this was his story. He and his wife were sitting in the living room. Their old dog was asleep on the hearth, and suddenly the dog became upset and wanted to go back out. Very unusual for this dog. So as the wife was taking the dog out, she saw a fireball go across the sky, and he was an FAA inspector. And she called back to him, I just saw a plane going in on fire. You're going to get a phone call in a few minutes. Instead, what happened was his young son, 7 years old, came running downstairs saying, Mommy, Daddy, Jeffy, his older brother, just came in my room with a bunch of little blue men, and he told me to tell you that he's all right. And what was so poignant about this, and why the man was so eager to talk, was that the older boy, as a teenager, had died in a car accident the week before. And there he was. And the man said, do I have any reason whatsoever to believe this? And I said, what I'm saying right now, I said, this so-called close encounter experience or alien contact has got something to do with the dead, because they're involved with this. And, so yeah, I think the soul is terribly important. And it makes me feel very uneasy that they would be, this gets back to secrecy, so secretive about all of this in a world where most of the intellectuals don't believe the soul exists. It's like we're kind of sitting ducks, and I think to myself, I've thought about this a lot. How do I look to my own soul? Because I don't want to be the victim of some kind of intervention or control after I die. I want to be a natural, free soul. Whatever destiny awaits me, I want it to be a destiny I want to experience.
Is there a possibility that the visitors are preparing us for some kind of shift in consciousness or into a non-physical reality? And are there any indications that humanity is going through this shift? And if so, what role do the visitors possibly play in facilitating our transition to like such a non-physical existence?
Well, thank you for the simple questions early in the morning.
Sorry about that. This is
That's
an opportunity that doesn't come every day. So,
well, can you unpack that a little bit? Start with the first part of the question. There's about 4 parts to it.
So is there a possibility that the visitors, when they're interacting with us on so many levels, that they might be preparing us for like a shift in consciousness?
A shift in consciousness. Well, what would that mean? Well, first of all, there's already a shift in consciousness going on. We're realizing they're real. And that is a significant shift in consciousness. But there's a larger question, and that is, we live on a planet that is, to say the least, unstable. It's been unstable for at least nearly 3 million years, 2.8 million years. It's been going through the Pleistocene, now the Holocene, and now what is laughingly called the Anthropocene. This period is a period of alternating brief interglacials and deep glaciations where the planet almost goes to sleep. We evolved during the last glaciation. We went into that glaciation living very simply, and came out of it fully clothed and in the later parts of the Stone Age, highly evolved indigenous societies all over the world. In other words, the Ice Age challenged us. We are now in another period of transition. How it will fall out, I don't know. It could easily lead to the complete extinction of this species. This planet extinguishes species all the time. It's routine on planet Earth. 12,000 years ago, a huge number of species were extinguished. That's why we don't have giant ground sloths and American horses, camels in America, all kinds of things, that just mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers. They all went extinct. And when the Europeans, and so did most of the human beings during the Younger Dryas, the entire Clovis culture was wiped out in the United States. So when the Europeans came, they found almost no animals and a rather small human population compared to what you would think especially that we now know the continent has been populated not for 12,000 years like used to be claimed, but for more like 30 or 40,000 years. So what happened? And what happened was this period called the Younger Dryas took place. We probably went through the debris field of an exploded supernova, the physical hard debris, and were bombarded with meteors and things for 2,000 years. We live in an area called the local bubble by astronomers. Local bubble is an area where there are many exploding stars. So we are on a vulnerable little planet in an area of the galaxy which is full of supernovas. What do you expect to happen? What happens is we get beat up. And this planet is, as I say, it's unstable. They might be here because they already know that something is going to unfold here that will take us into another level of reality. By that I mean the planet will not be able to support us and we'll end up all in the soul state only. In which case they're midwives to the souls, soul scavengers, or both.
And that's perfect, because that's exactly where I was going to go to. Is I heard you mention recently they may be playing the role of midwives. So thank you for that very much.
I find it very fascinating that the increase of people sharing their NDEs is also increasing with these beings like revealing themselves, showing themselves more often. But it could also be in part due to how fast we can share information now.
I think that the internet is a huge factor in bringing us together. Right. It's not telepathy, but it's close. The other thing is this: it could end in a second. If there was a solar flare the size of the Carrington event of 1853, that's a 45 on the solar flare scale. A big X, that's an X45. A big X flare is like an X3 or 4. I think in this current solar cycle, so far we haven't had more than an X7, and the satellites are designed to withstand that. But an X45 would wipe the satellites, and everything would suddenly go dark, and we would be back to where we were before any of this existed, and that would happen in an instant. If we're going to become telepathic, that would be when we would do it.
And to add to that, because it's perfect, is we spoke with an abductee, Jeff Selver, and he was given information about like future of possible events. And there was another near-death experiencer I listened to who mirrored the same kind of information that Jeff was sharing, that of some kind of event that might be coming. And they mentioned, because he mentioned that humanity, he was on his way back to his body. Some near-death experiencers experience future visions, if you will. And he said that something had changed because we had changed, but he couldn't understand why we were not, because right now we're living in a fear-based reality. We're always trying to think about or outmaneuver the other person, right? And we're not living in unity. And he said in his vision, we were living in unity. And he also mentioned that the geography had changed, like some kind of big event had happened. The United States looked completely different. So he kind of wondered, like, if there was some kind of impending cataclysm, whether it's the sun, and he believes it would be the sun. I just find that fascinating that they're issuing these kind of warnings.
I don't ever think about that because the visitors don't address me in the context of future visions. And I wouldn't be interested anyway, because I've known too many people who have had visions of landings and future visions and so forth that haven't come true. One of them recently, in March, a couple of years ago, I believe, he believed that he had been told by his guides that there would be a landing, and he went so far as to try to get into touch with the United Nations and made a big deal politically and everything, trying to get this noticed. And of course, I said to him, it's not going to happen. I said, I can't tell you how many landings I have been told were going to happen that didn't happen. Eventually, someone will be right, though, I suppose. With regard to the future, I don't think they know the future that well. I think they probably know more about it than we do. And when you're with them, you get the feeling that they have their moment is what bigger than ours. In other words, they know the past more accurately and the future more certainly. But it's not total. It's not total. I don't think. I could be wrong about that. If it's not impossible that I am, but this feeling of imminence, something's coming. You can go back to ancient Roman times, and people were waiting for the end of the world. Jesus thought the world was going to end. They all do. I mean, it's just that sense of imminence comes from our own awareness of our death, because the world's going to end for every single one of us. And whether or not these predictions have any basis in reality, to my mind, is just a matter of chance. Some of them probably will eventually. But back in the 10th century, everyone thought, well, it's going to be the year 1000, the world's going to end. And a lot of wealthy nobles and stuff gave all of their possessions to the church. Then the world didn't end, and they wanted them back. But the church said, no, you get it now. And they ended up without anything.
Okay.
And, I know plenty of cases where groups of people, there's a horrible case. Remember, what was that called? Those people who died who all committed suicide during the Hale-Bopp comet?
Jim Jones. Oh no, that
No,
was
no.
the
Anyway,
Hale-Bopp
Hale-Bopp.
meteor.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. They had their website on Admiral
Heaven's
Bobby
Gate.
Ray Inman's servers. It was all connected somehow to DARPA, and they all committed suicide. Nothing happened, did it? I mean, and the Jim Jones things was pretty much the same thing. They were committing suicide because the world was going to end. Or I just don't buy into it. I'm living for right now, today, and right now, today, this room is working fine.
That's right. I agree. Daniel?
I've often wondered with my own experiences with various contactees, there is that kind of spurring or this carrot and stick, like, hey, this event's going to be coming. So there's this kind of, it spurs you into motion. Do you feel like that might be part of it?
It does. It activates you. I
Mm-hmm.
have that too. I mean, I've been given plenty of end of the world stuff. The first one was during my October of 1985 experience, when I was hit in the head with a thing that caused me to see the planet on fire and my son dying at a young age. And now it's arguable the planet is on fire. At least if you ask Canada and Siberia and parts of the United States, they would answer yes, and so would Greece and quite a few other countries. The Amazon was on fire for a long time. I think if we do go into a situation where there is a major change in the structure of the environment, the young people are vulnerable, including my son. So maybe there's something to it. But I can't live that way. I can't live in it, thinking about thinking about, oh, there's going to be something's going to happen in 2025, 2026, 2027. Something's always going to happen next year. And I'm just not waiting for it. I'm living here now. This is where I am. This is what I am doing.
I think that there might be a possibility, Whitley, that when these experiencers are having these visions, if you will, that it's not really the visitors telling them what's going to happen, but trying to see the reaction of the individual when they show them these events, if you will, in order to
Yeah.
try to raise their awareness to, like, let's say, climate disasters and such. You think that might be a possibility rather than them saying this is what's going to happen during this time?
There are two consistent messages that I'm getting from the experiencer community and that are in my life as well. One is about the danger of nuclear war and which has been greatly emphasized by them, by the visitors, going to weapons production sites and missile silos and so forth. And in fact, that actually started even before the Roswell incident. It started in 1946 when the United States started blowing off V-2 rockets at White Sands. They got shot, some of them got shot down by an unknown factor, as they put it. And that was because they were, it's not because they were threatening us, which is how the military looks at it. It's because it's their way of warning us. They didn't bother with the Germans because the Germans didn't have the bomb, but we did have the bomb, and they put two and two together, and they saw we were experimenting with missiles and we had atomic bombs, and they started shooting at the missiles to warn us that this is a bad combination. Now we sit on a planet that's loaded with missiles and atomic bombs. So there's that. And then there are the environmental things that, that's been my life for a long time, even before I was conscious of the visitors. Obviously, it was in my life because the two books I wrote before this happened, there were three actually, were War Day, about the dangers of nuclear war, Nature's End, about the dangers of environmental collapse, and a book called Cat Magic, which is about the fairy faith and the witchcraft and the fairy lore. And the visitors are connected to the fairy lore somehow. They are warning about climate change and they are warning about nuclear war. So that message was already in me before I had the communion experience. The communion experience was to activate someone that they had already prepared to do what they intended me to do. And this is part of it. Warning against those things is fundamental to the close encounter experience. All of us, I think, hear those warnings in one way or another.
So when we interact with them, there's a element of familiarity, but also otherness that is hard to explain. They seem to do in metaphors or maybe visions or other things that are kind of, activating us in a certain direction. Have you found there's like a commonality of direction where they're trying to point us towards?
I'm not in a position to answer that question directly because I don't have enough data. The experience is so complex, but there's certain imagery in it that is consistent across many, many lives. And I think the leading is the owl imagery that's Mike Cleland has written some terrific books about. And Rice University, by the way, which is in this deep, its university's symbol is the owl. And when I went to Rice for the first time, I thought, oh, my God, all these owls around here. Do they realize that they're already in the close encounter experience without knowing it? I pointed that out to Jeff Kripal, and he says, well, I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. Now, I guess it was in A New World, I wrote about the owl and the relationship between the life of the owl and the visitors and what they do, because it's very metaphoric on many different levels. The owl is a symbol of wisdom and mystery. Those are two things the visitors bring to us really in spades. But also, if you look at the life of the owl is silent, travels by night, can see in the dark, moves without a sound through the woods. It has superb hearing, in other words, superb senses. When it hears little creatures scuttling in their burrows underground, fly down, drop down, open the burrow with its powerful claws, take the little creature out, take the abductee out, and initiate the little chipmunk or whatever it is into a new level of being by killing its body, and initiate the close encounter witness into a new vision of human experience by what happens during the abduction, we get put back physically now. Is that preparation? Does that work back to what we were talking about earlier about uh, feelings about change in the future? It could. This is an initiatory experience on one level, and all of that symbolism, primarily, and I think the owl symbolism, is about that initiatory experience.
Sure, sure, and so like you know, a lot of we hear now with within the disclosure community and all these congressional hearings and stuff is that the visitors are predatory or they're a threat. So is there any way that they can be like predatory, like humans are with our animals, but we don't like our pets, and so they could be predatory without trying to destroy us? Is there anything to that, you think?
Every year, shepherds gather their flocks and shear them, take the wool for their use, and the sheep in the next year they grow back more wool. And I think there is some indication that experience is our wool. In other words, they harvest experience from us because they can't have it themselves. And how they do that and how they use it, I don't know. But if you were, for example, a machine that had also a biological component and no life experience, you would probably crave the illusion of life experience, and you might harvest it if you could do that. One time, I came very close to going with the visitors. I didn't do it partly because they were too scary, and their way of welcoming me is as soon as I started to walk down to where they were, it was in the pre-dawn, and there was no question about it. They were there, and they were waiting for me, and it had all been set up beforehand. I hear in my head this telepathic voice go, I hesitated for a moment. Come on, come on. And it sounded so mean. I thought to myself, maybe that's exactly what I don't want to do after all. I turned around and went back to the house. And a few minutes later, I got taken into something that happened to me when I was a tiny baby, but not just remembering it. I relived it in absolutely exquisite detail of the moment I first walked. This was a communication that you're taking your first steps now, but you're still a baby. And it was also an indication or a revelation of two things. One, we contain within us an absolutely perfectly detailed map of our lives. And two, they can access that. That's what it all meant. So if some of them are here harvesting parts of our lives, they could be more like shepherds than predators. But I still would rather not have that happen.
You mentioned earlier that you're interested in interviewing us. So I was just kind of curious what kind of questions you might have, because nobody's ever really, normally we introduce ourselves and say it, but nobody's mentioned that before.
Well, I'm very interested in close encounter phenomena and close encounter witnesses. So um, my first question to you would be, of course, what happened? What do you remember? And my second question would be, how did it change your life? And my third question would be, how do you feel about it now? And those would be the beginning questions, and we'd go from those questions. No, I think that dialoguing about this in public is very important for the experience community in general. We've got to talk about it. We've got to air out our memories and our imaginations as best we can, because all of us are the same. We have a mixture of memory and imagined experience, and we can't really tell what's what. It's just the nature of the human mind. It's to be accepted. It just is. It is what it is. I've got certain memories that I know are not imaginary, and others that I'm not sure about, and others that I suspect may be. And if we look into our own lives and our own memories, we'll all be that way. And what's interesting is to explore that together, not as, oh, it was just his imagination, and there's no make any value judgments about it. We're talking about something about the way the human mind works, and we can't help it, uh, but we can explore it. And in exploring these things, we can, all of us, begin to get a taste of what our collective experience is. What are we as experiencers? Why are we here? What triggered it in each of us? And there's going to be a similarity there at that key point, I think.
And that kind of goes along with my question, because we've got all these things that are going on within like the government and all these whistleblowers, witnesses, etc., and the military narrative, threat narrative, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And yet again, we're still stuck with the experiencer being kind of swept under the rug and
Yeah.
ignored. And
Right.
at some point in time, we can't have that. And I think that some point in time was yesterday, in a manner of speaking. And so,
Oh,
as
yeah,
an experiencer,
it's on that panel. But yesterday, you're talking about the congressional hearing, or you're just saying it should have happened already. I agree with you, but they don't know how to do this. And look at it from the standpoint primarily of the Air Force. Their job is to protect us from threats from above. This is what happened. At some point in the past, apparently some point before the 60s or during the 60s, people began to be abducted. The first public case was Betty and Bernie Hill, of course. But then it expanded massively. And the Air Force not only did nothing, but they used social engineering to make a mockery of people like us in public. Anytime anyone went out in public, they were mocked mercilessly. I lived that. Now, you want to see how it was for me. There's a documentary on MGM Plus called Beyond, which the third episode of it goes into what I went through in the media. And it was hell. It's horrible to sit in a media context feeling pain and know you have been raped and have them laughing in your face about it. That's not easy. That was engineered by someone. It was done. We have to figure out how to become part of this dialogue. Well, like the Collins elite in the Pentagon believes these are demons, and therefore we are all in league with demons. I am in league with demons of all things, as if any demon would think I could be in league with them. It's ridiculous. Right, exactly.
unreal.
But the Air Force, they can't admit it. What they did for 80, all these years, not 80, but from the 60s at least, they can't admit that they let this happen and they made a mockery of us in order to hide the fact that it was real. And how do I know they knew about it? Well, it's very simple. I believe it was in 1986 when I was beginning to do research about this and starting to work on the book that a man called David W. Webb came into my life. Dr. Webb was, if you look David W. Webb up on Wikipedia, you will see he was a prominent space scientist and consulting with every alphabet agency there was. And he wanted to meet me. He came out to the cabin. He met us, spent time with us. He introduced me to an allergist who gave us, excuse me, I've got allergies. Speaking of allergies, that's why I'm getting hoarse. Who gave us epinephrine injectors to have all over the house because they said that, and he was right, that if they touch you, the little gray people, you can get a very powerful allergic reaction, which actually happened to me a couple times. And happened to Raven Dana, too, when she was in the house and had a direct experience. So they knew, is my point. They knew. They definitely did know. And they know at that time, and they know much more now, I'm sure. And that's all hidden. We've been left out in the cold. And now you go to a congressperson, which I have had the experience of doing, and even brushing up against this subject, and they're going to walk out of the room. Most of them. They don't want it.
Well, I want to
Nobody
thank you.
wants this. That's the truth. Nobody.
That's it.
Except I want us and we want ourselves, damn it. And we want our place in this conversation, and we will get it.
That's right. That's right. I want to thank you for your advocacy on that. And I mean, from the very beginning, from the very get-go with your first experience and how mind-blowing and reality-changing that was for you to be here, even speaking with us today as an advocate for experiencers. And it's, I mean, I can't really think of a set organization that backs up and supports experiencers. You had yourself, John Mack, unfortunately, Bud Hopkins, and the like. But as far as organizational, there is none. And I think that, I often wonder if that's intentional. And I really just think that. So if someone's an experiencer,
I think we've been marginalized by careful, skillful social engineering.
Yes, I agree.
I don't think it was done by the visitors. I think it was done by primarily Air Force intelligence, now known as aerospace intelligence, because they're the ones who are always on my back. They won't allow me to talk to a lot of people who I used to be friends with. Now they won't talk to me. And they won't talk to me because aerospace security told them not to. And they have to obey those orders. They don't want their people anywhere near us, the Air Force. And it's not their fault. They couldn't do this right. The visitors set them up. They were set up to fail. And now they're trying to hide it. And they were set up to do that too. Because where does the secrecy start and who controls it? There's two pictures behind me. One is a picture of Anne. You can see beside it the picture of the lady on the cover of Communion. Anne was about revealing everything. The lady on the cover is about hiding it. And they are the architects of the secrecy, period. There's no two ways about it. They are the ones who control it. Absolutely. They may be controlling, pushing buttons inside the Air Force. We talked briefly about hybrids earlier. What if there are hybrids, like we suggested, who are perfectly competent and also have telepathy? And I mean, perfectly competent to be in society and also have telepathy. They're going to be in the places of power. You may be sure. If for all we know, they could be controlling this from the human side as well at this point. And here we are sitting out here, standing out here on the end of the plank, looking down at the sharks, all of us by ourselves. But by God, we may be out here on the end of the plank, but we have each other.
That's right.
We have each other.
That's right. We never forget it.
There seems to be kind of like a mixed bag of intentions. And I imagine, since the universe is so big and we obviously live in some kind of a duality, that there are different agendas in place, different beings, because we hear, and we speak with so many different abductees, and a lot of them have a same central message, but then there are some, and we spoke with Peter Slattery recently, and he mentioned that from his point of view, that there are beings that seem to be more negatively oriented versus the ones that are more positively oriented.
Some of them are testy as hell, frankly. And some of the hybrids are what we call hybrids. As I said earlier, I'm not sure that's what they are, but they're somehow altered and they're connected with this. They really do not, I wouldn't say they don't like me. They're not comfortable around me. My experience with the Greys has been definitely an arc from very negative and fearful, which was the very initial period of weeks. But then my curiosity, which they probably suspected would happen, overcame my fear. And I started going out in the woods in the middle of the night to try to signal to them that I was ready for more. And the relationship changed then and became what it is now, which is a very loving relationship where they can get mad at me. But, Annie, my wife, used to say, Whitley, you may really be the most annoying person in the world, certainly the annoying person I've ever met. And I don't try to be annoying, but I'm annoying to them too, because there's this thing that we do at night that's very important to them. And it's important to me too. I couldn't write my books without it, which is getting up at about an hour and a half before sunrise and opening my mind and going into the meditative state and basically communing using the implant. And it's very essential to my work. But they often have to wake me up, and they go through kind of moods. Like recently, they've been very sweet about it and have been waking me up with things like a little dry kiss or a blow in my face or sound of a beeping in the living room and stuff. When I don't get up on my own, they do that for 2 or 3 nights. I don't get up on my own, and I sleep through it. Then they get angry, and things happen in here that you would not believe. They're not. It's not easy to deal with them when they're angry. They get very angry. So in other words, what I'm talking about is a relationship that's like a relationship with human beings who are not human beings. That's what it's like. And I wouldn't trade it for the world anymore. And I'm not alone in this. A lot of people started out in the close encounter experience the same place I was and ended up here.
Yeah.
That arc is familiar to many people.
Three of us included. So, yeah, I know we only have a few minutes left, Whitley. If there was a message that you would like to give to the viewership, experiencers or otherwise, that you would like to part them with at this point in time, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, I will say this to the experiencers. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a beautiful soul. And somebody who sees those souls knew it. That's why they chose you. That's what you are and what you have. Nobody can ever take it away from you. That's number one, to the experiencers. Number two, to the people who are trying to grapple with this, like in the Congress and so forth. We can't figure us out. You can't figure us out. So let's get together and see if together we can't figure us out. Let the experience into the conversation. We belong in the conversation. And goodness knows where it will go once we're in it. But it's going to be in the right direction.
That's right. And we won't be quiet about it. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Especially not this channel. And I don't believe you're going to be silent about it either, Whitley. So thank you so much. It's been a distinct honor and pleasure to have you here on Cosmic Convergence. And we do hope that we can speak with you again very soon, because we could have a conversation that could last a lifetime, I believe. And we've just barely scratched the surface. Again, thank you so much. This is off my bingo card, but it's still on there. So I guess I have a Whitley Strieber bingo card for my entire life.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
We look forward to the next book that you are hopefully working on. And your
Yes, I
knowledge is always insightful. Great. Have you figured out a title for it yet?
It's called The Fourth Mind, and it's supposed to be out in December. He laughed.
Yeah.
Probably January, but I'm trying.
Good. Well, we shall wait with patient anticipation as much as possible.
Just really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, your work has influenced me in my personal experience and has led me down the path I am currently. So again, thank you for being vulnerable and investing so much of your life into sharing and being bold. And just really appreciate you. So thank you.
I have to thank you guys too for being out there and doing this.
Thank you.
You put yourselves out there to do this.
Never thought I would be doing this.
Never going to stop.
For sure.
Never going to stop.
But yeah, just wanted to say thank you very much. And you validated some things for me as well. And that always goes a long way, because there was a time I felt crazy for a while. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, why would that be? I'm amazed.
Yeah.
That's what they want us to think.
Big time. I thought that was what had happened to me too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you so much. And then, so everybody, like, share, subscribe, please, and follow Mr. Strieber. With that, thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Mr. Strieber, and take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bad monkey.